If you've noticed a lot more hair in your hairbrush lately, or even in the basin of the sink, you don't need a miracle shampoo. You need to understand your body's natural aging process and learn how we can decrease those signs of aging. We're told that hair loss is inevitable after a certain age, but thankfully, science says otherwise. Let's go over those mechanisms of hair loss and what we can do about it. For both men and women, there's a hormone called DHT, which means dihydrotestosterone, and that plays a role in hair loss for both men and women. But there's significant differences in how it impacts the hair loss due to aging. In men, men have more of androgenic alopecia. What does that mean? So that means hair loss specifically related to this hormone DHT. There are certain follicles that are more susceptible to it than others, and that's what accounts for the male pattern baldness. So they're more likely to have up here and at the top, and for that reason, with men, transplant surgery is more likely to be effective because they can actually care from the other follicles that are not impacted as much by the hormone and move it up to the area of hair loss. There's a Norwood scale that shows the different patterns and the extent of hair loss with men. And so this scale is going to actually drive the clinical decision-making process as far as recommendations of medications, just later stages that might be a transplant surgery. Women are different, so they're more likely to experience thinning all over or widening of the part at menopause. There's also other hormones that get affected and disrupted, and they play a role as well. Examples might be thyroid levels or cortisol levels. Thyroid issues can either be hyper, meaning excess, or hypo, deficiency of thyroid hormones. Either one can cause a hair loss, and it tends to be diffuse, meaning all over. Cortisol is a hormone that elevates, particularly after menopause, and that can also cause hair loss. Remember, after menopause, the estrogen levels are going to plummet, and we see decreased levels of fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are cells that help to make collagen, and fibroblasts are also involved with hair loss because they impact the hair follicle activity. Now, with women, we have a different scale. Remember, men was the Norwood scale for hair loss. Women use the Ludwig and Sinclair hair loss scales. There's different prescription options that are available from the dermatologist, like Minoxidil. Minoxidil actually helps to improve circulation. Some people don't respond as well, depending on how much of a particular enzyme they have. It's called sulfotransferase, and some people have low levels of that. Aspirin and other salicylic acid compounds can actually impact the levels of the enzyme. So that would affect how much that minoxidil prescription can help you. Other prescriptions, finasteride and dutasteride, are 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. This means that they affect the enzyme that actually is going to form that DHT that attacks the follicles. Spironolactones also can help block some of those hormones. But these are all options that are prescription, and you would see your dermatologist in order to get those. There are some good options for you to use at home without a prescription as well. And we're going to go over those, but remember, as always, this is general information. If you have specific health concerns, you need to discuss it with your physician. And also check with your doctor or pharmacist before you add any kind of supplements or other things that might interfere with your prescription medications. So to better understand the hair loss and how these things can help us, let's look at the hair cycle. So this is different phases that the follicles go through. The first phase is the anagen or the growth phase. So the cells at the root of the hair shaft, which is deep in the scalp, and those cells are dividing, pushing the hair out through the follicle, and that's the hair that becomes visible once it gets out of the follicle and onto the scalp. This phase usually lasts from 2 to 7 years. The length of the phase actually can determine how long is the maximum length of hair. Roughly 80% or so of your hair is in this phase at any point in time. Caffeine can actually prolong this phase of the hair cycle. Next phase is the transitional phase or catagen phase. The growth stops, the follicle shrinks and detaches from the blood supply. So the hair is essentially floating in the scalp without being attached to blood vessels. This phase lasts for 2 to 3 weeks. Small percentage of your hair is in this phase at any point in time. The resting phase, the follicle is completely dormant and inactive, and a new hair is forming underneath it. This can take about 3 months. Roughly 10 to 15% of the hair on your scalp is in this phase. And then the shedding phase is the last phase. The old hair is actively pushed out by that new hair that is growing in the follicle. Usually people can lose 50 to 100 hairs a day. That's a normal part of this cycle. Once the strand is shed, the follicle returns to the anagen or growth phase. Now, the way that DHT hormone works is it can shrink the follicle, leading to a thin peach fuzz rather than normal hair. It also shortens the growing phase, leading to prolonged resting phase and increased shedding. Over time, progressive shrinking of the follicles is going to cause the follicles to just become dormant. Let's go through some of the different things that you can do to help. Rice extract, angelica root, and ginger, these can all block DHT, and they don't use the sulfotransferase pathway. So if you have a lower level of that particular enzyme, these items don't require it. So you might get better results with them. Usually it's topical application. And those items are water soluble. Caffeine, as I mentioned, prolongs the growth phase and boosts microcirculation. So you could make a strong tea. Actually, you could make a water-based solution with all of the water-soluble items and put it in a spray bottle. One caution with water-soluble or water-based items is that it tends to go bad very quickly. So if you make like a tea solution, you put any of those other things, ginger, angelica root, rice extract, any of those, do it in small amounts. And after 3 or 4 days, toss it because it's going to start going bad. I mentioned the caffeine extract. You could make like green tea, for example, and put some of those other things in it. Pumpkin seed extract. This blocks the 5-alpha reductase, and it has nutrients for your scalp health. The saw palmetto, you've probably heard of this. Saw palmetto also blocks 5-alpha reductase. Very often you see the saw palmetto and pumpkin seed extract together. Those are fat soluble. So you could get those items and put it in oil. You can also take the palmetto or pumpkin seed extract orally as a supplement. Again, check to make sure with your doctor or pharmacist that it's not a problem with any conditions you have or particular prescription medications that you might already be taking. Sometimes the saw palmetto can cause some stomach upset. Castor oil for topical use, it can be a bit heavy. So usually when you go to the supermarket or pharmacy in the hair care section, you see bottles of different oils. Usually the castor oil is mixed with other things like jojoba or olive oil or coconut oil. These other oils are not as heavy as the castor oil because the castor oil by itself, if you use too often or too much, can actually block the follicles. It's so heavy. So we don't want that. Rosemary essential oil also can block 5-alpha reductase. There's a caution with rosemary essential oil. Anybody who is prone to seizure disorders should probably avoid rosemary. In addition to blocking 5-alpha reductase, rosemary essential oil is anti-inflammatory and it can improve blood flow. Other essential oils that generally reduce inflammation and improve circulation: peppermint, lavender, and clary sage, and also turmeric. I think you could do fat-soluble materials and water-soluble materials. I've already suggested that the water-soluble materials, you can mix up a tea and put it in a spray bottle. Fat-soluble materials, you can get those bottles at the pharmacy or even in the grocery store in the hair care section. They often come in a bottle with a little twisty nozzle that's great for applying to your scalp. And you can add right to it some of those essential oils. I have tried adding the saw palmetto and pumpkin seed. Here's what I've found. Those supplements that you get, they have all kinds of fillers. And so even though it's technically fat soluble, you're not going to get complete dissolution in the material. You would have to actually purchase the saw palmetto berries and extract it in oil for a long period of time. If you get the ones that are in the capsule, you could probably poke a hole in gel caps I'm talking about. Poke a hole and just squeeze that oily solution right into the hair oil that you bought. But if you try and use the dry material in capsules, you're going to end up with sludge at the bottom of your oil bottle. And I'm not convinced that very much of the active is actually going to go into solution. But the essential oils mix beautifully with the oil that you can purchase. I like to put that at night and then just go downstairs. I'm watching TV for maybe a half hour or so. I put one of those bonnets so I don't have to worry about getting oil everywhere, and then just wash it out. Really good shampoo. Red light therapy is another option to help you. There are different wavelengths. Okay, usually just the red light, 630 to 670 nanometers. And this helps to stimulate cellular activity. It improves circulation. It brings more oxygen and nutrients to the cells, and it's going to help those follicles be healthier and have more energy and nutrients for hair growth. Red light can prolong that growth phase of hair. And remember that quality red light devices are going to disclose the wavelengths and different energy levels. They do have ones that are made specifically for the scalp. I think they call it Theradome, or there's different ones, okay? And so that information should be disclosed when you have your device and look at the instructions. Protein is very important for all kinds of tissues and hormones and neurotransmitters in the body. We talked about that in another video. It's definitely going to help with healthy scalp and hair as well. So check out that other video for information on protein and its role and the levels that are recommended. We talked about a lot of information in this video today. I've put some citations of different research articles that I referenced down in the description, so make sure you check those out. If you have any topics that you want to request more information about, please put those in the comments and I'll be reading the comments and looking at that as I think about new topics to share. Make sure you like and subscribe so that you can see my next video.